Todd, describe for me what the last week has been like for you.
Well, first of all, it's been a flurry of executive orders. And in my business, immigration studies, we're supposed to be looking at those orders and also how they are impacting on immigrant behavior at the border. So then what's happening at the border, trying to keep abreast of that when I'm not actually at the border. So it's just trying to write about how all of this is impacting the border, and then of course the interior. All the new policies are just rolling out like machine gun fire, um, very fast and furious, with a lot to digest and explain to our readers and whatnot. So that's really what I've been doing: writing, reading, and talking to people.
You're somebody who, with all your experience, you've been to the border, you spent a lot of time in Mexico and abroad. When President Trump got reelected in November, what did you anticipate? But what did you anticipate him taking office was going to be like in relation to you professionally? If things were going to slow down, speed up, chaos.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've been covering this thing for 4 years straight, the greatest mass migration crisis in US history. We've never seen anything close to this. 10, 12 million people crossed in from 180 different countries around the world. And I've been covering it for 4 years, and I, I have like a kind of a sentimental attachment to it, and now it's over. So in a weird way, I'm sad. Uh, that was the most incredible thing I think I've ever seen covered. And I've covered wars and insurrections, and I've been all over the place doing all kinds of interesting stuff. This one was amazing to be part of. And now it's over. I believe that the greatest mass migration crisis is effectively over once Trump was elected. It's, I went to Mexico City just before Christmas. I think I was there in December, and just a couple of weeks before that, I was down in Tapachula, which is in the southern precincts of Mexico on the Guatemala border, big city, talking to a lot of immigrants. And this was after Trump was elected. So people were telling me that most of them were telling me that they're going home, that it's not worth it to pay the money for smuggling to try to cross the border when the odds are now against them. They're going to be pushed back or returned home. A lot of them were planning to just stay in Mexico and live there for 4 years until hoping for another Democrat. Um, but some of them were going to go for it. They were going to just go for it and try to get in before Trump was sworn in. I went with a group of about 30 of them to try to hop a freight train. And I was with them all day long. And, their feeling was that, they had heard this rumor that Biden at the last minute was going to just open the gates wide for them. There was this rumor running all around, which was an indicator of just how desperate they were. These were people waiting in line for CBP One, for the app, the parole program, where they get to walk across at the invitation of the US government, by invitation. And they'd been waiting, and they realized we're not going to get in, so let's make a run for it. And we heard that they're going to open the borders. So that's the kind of desperation that was going on. So you could tell that once Trump was in office, most of them were just going to give up. And I think that's what's happening right now.
And so he gets in. The CBP One app is just deleted. What was it
Deleted.
with minutes, right?
Yes. First thing. First thing. And then, you saw all the video of weeping, crying migrants who were scheduled but then didn't get to come in. That went all viral. But there were predictions that without those programs, people were going to just try to bust the border and cross in on overland, but they didn't. They haven't. That turns out not to be true at all because one of the other first things that Trump did was he put in place something called 212F. Go Google 212F of the INA, which is the equivalent of Title 42 pushbacks during the pandemic. Everybody that we catch gets pushed back right away, back into Mexico immediately. So it makes it not worth the cost when that happens. You don't want to spend the money to cross if you're just going to end up back in Mexico. So the numbers are, and Biden would never do that. Biden would let them all in. It was the opposite. We'd catch them and release them in, you know. So the big change was we catch them and we send you back. 100% of everyone. Nobody gets in at all if we catch you. I mean, that's just a sea change. If you're an immigrant, you're going home.
The uh, do you anticipate that number? I feel like 10 to 12 million is low. I mean, I've heard some people say 20. I've heard upwards of 40.
Well, the truth is nobody really knows 100%. Center for Immigration Studies, we tend to go with a more conservative number that we can prove that we have evidence for. But the truth is our number probably is low because what we don't, what the number that we is squishy that we don't really have a handle on are the gotaways. We know that at least 2 million, 2.4 million people got away through the border and into the interior without anyone laying hands on them. But the conventional wisdom is that those are just the ones that we have been able to tally. We saw them line of sight or footprints in the sand or video surveillance. A drone caught them or an aircraft caught them crossing and nobody picked them up. But we believe that there are probably a lot more gotaways than 2.4 million. I mean, maybe twice or three times as many, but nobody really knows.
So you go from covering, you know, in Mexico as they're coming across the border. Now, in less than a week, it's flipped, right? Like getting people to go back home. It's
It's over.
unbelievable, Todd. I mean, it's
It's
just
over. I mean, I've been telling people for 4 years now, how long will it take to stop this for the, what about the Senate border bill, the big Langford bill that Kamala Harris was always talking about? Trump killed this thing, and if we need this to stop it. And I've been saying all along for years that no, you only need about 1 hour to stop it. 1 hour. 212F and remain in Mexico, and you're done. That's it. It's all that's necessary to deter the vast majority of people coming in. Detention, all immigrants are supposed to be detained now. I'll be very surprised if we're actually releasing any of the ones that we catch into the country right now. And if that's not happening, you're staying home. What's the point of spending the money if you're not getting in?
well, and now though it's oh, go
Took
ahead.
an hour. I just said it took an hour, just like I've been saying.
Does it make you wonder too? You know, Republicans. I mean, they had control of the House in the last 2 years. You know, could there have been more that what more could they have done to?
Not much. Not much because there was a split. The chambers were split. You had Republicans that were interested in doing that, but none of the Democrats that controlled the Senate were interested. And the White House was definitely not interested. So, what bill could you possibly float through? Nothing. All of those levers of power reside in the Oval Office, only in the Oval Office. Greg Abbott can't do anything. None of the states can do anything. It's just the Oval Office and DHS. And that is, you have to deport them and expel them. If you're not deporting and expelling them, they will come. When you are deporting and expelling them immediately and detaining, they'll stop. And that's what happened. They just flicked the switch to detention, deportation, and expulsion. Now I'm hearing that the numbers are about 500 a day border wide that they're catching, none of whom are being released, and all of whom are texting back down the trail, God, they're not releasing us. Don't bother.
And what
That's
about?
all.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's an executive power, solely an executive power.
Well, and Tom Holman just comes in and he is already hitting cities.
Right. That those ice raids, that's the first second of the first round of a really long bout. So don't get too excited. I mean, it's exciting to see it happening for the first time in 4 years. ICE agents unchained, unshackled. They've been banned from doing operations like that for 4 years straight. 1,000 of them left government service demoralized. So there's only about 5,000 left, maybe in a few hundred more than that. It's not enough for what they want to do, but it's enough to get them started. So that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing the very beginnings. They're picking up the worst first, as they say. Um, that that optic also has a tremendous outsized impact down the trail because all of those people have cell phones. They're texting, oh my God, ICE raid. I just got picked up by ICE to their family and friends who are telling all their villages and towns and cities and neighborhoods, oh my God, they're deporting now. So that even if it's small in scale now, it still has an outsized impact on in terms of deterrence. People are going to be like, I'm not spending 10 grand for that. I'm not going to do it. So as that, but those raids are going to be just part of the 7 days a week, 30 days a month, 12 months a year for 4 years. So just it's going to be the norm. That kind of ice raids everywhere all the time for 4 years running.
I don't know how logistically they do that right now. I mean, what cities are a priority because everyone has them.
They're hitting the blue cities. Well, actually, I think they're mainly hitting the blue cities just for marketing. I think that's more marketing purposes, political. They they want to show those blue cities that and the people in them that you're not safe there. Don't bother going to blue cities because it's going to be you're still going to have a bullseye on you. We're doubling down and trebling down with ICE in those sanctuary jurisdictions. So don't get too comfy in those places. That's basically, it's all messaging right now. And it's very important messaging because I've never met a migrant anywhere who didn't have a modern cell phone, fully connected to social media and the internet and, chat rooms, live time intelligence. They're getting it as we deport them and arrest them. All that messaging is going down to families and neighborhoods and villages.
What do you anticipate as this, further expands with the pushback that you're seeing from these blue cities and blue states? One of which where I live in Arizona, which I would love to see them come here. And I mean, Katie Hobbs was adamant, not on my watch, not on my watch, not on my watch. Where do you see that going in terms of a potential clash?
Well, the polls are showing somewhere on the order of, 70 to 80% support, strong support for deportations in the interior of the country. Just too many got in and everybody sees them all around and you're panhandling and they're, on welfare systems and taking up space. And so, the majority of the public supports big mass deportation operations. If you're on the other side, your job is to erode that public support any way you can. And they're going to be doing it by information war. They're going to be doing it by propaganda, most of it false. I just wrote a piece published last week that I called Injustice Porn, which is what I call video news stories of crying, weeping children and migrants and advocates telling stories of abuse and terrible conditions and all that kind of stuff. And I advocate that I point out that first of all, injustice porn, the definition of it, my definition, I coined it. It's just which is that it's mostly propagandized stories of government abuses of migrants, um, tearjerker stories of deportations that are unverifiable or unverified. So they're without evidence. Any claim that a migrant makes, and they just make a claim, and there's no attempt to support the claim. In my view, is without evidence. It's the same as Trump claiming the election was stolen, and they would always say, without evidence, automatically, without evidence, he claimed the election was stolen. Well, the migrant mothers and their immigrant attorneys are claiming all this horrible stuff without evidence. And it needs to be called out like that. Evidence needs to be demanded on every one of those stories. And in my piece, I list 6 different cases of injustice porn in the past that actually survived and boomeranged and changed policy, only to be later proven false months later, way after it was too late. The damage was done, and that's what they're going to be doing again. So I'm just kind of putting people on notice to look for injustice porn, call it out, demand fact checks, get it proven wrong fast before it can influence government action and erode public support. There just recently was a great example of this I believe it was in Chicago, where they claimed that ICE agents were banging down the doors of a grammar school to round up all the immigrant kids. And this thing went for like 2 or 3 news cycles. NBC, ABC, New York Times, everybody covered this thing. Oh my God, they're raiding a school. The children are frightened. They're hiding under their desk. The principal bravely blocked the agents, and the whole thing turned out to be completely fabricated. There were no agents at that school. There was nobody blocked anybody. Nothing happened at all. It just was made up. That is injustice porn right there. It just happened like 2 days ago.
That's what I was waiting for that video where, a mother and a baby is crying and it appears that, they're being pulled away, something like that, where would it impact, an official, government official to say, oh, we can't do this anymore. We have to stop this.
Well, the case that I highlight in my piece, Injustice Porn at CIS.org, is um, Border Patrol did some raids before Trump took office and rounded up 80. And the injustice porn just flooded the zone. They all came, ACLU, the immigration rights lawyers, and all came in there and just started making stuff up. And they got arranged photos of little children holding up signs that were they're weeping that said, "My family picks your fruit." All of that kind of stuff. We're going to sue. And then sure enough, all the local elected officials came out and said, not here. We will protect our. That's what I'm talking about. Their only recourse is to try to undermine the current public support, to erode it down so that they can politically end the support for interior deportations. That be aware of that. Be ready for that.
Do you expect a some type of confrontation though with a mayor or a governor?
Well, Homan has talked about potentially arresting officials, elected officials, or not, maybe even non-elected officials, if they're seen as criminally obstructing lawful law enforcement operations, which immigration raids and sweeps are. It was interesting to see Tom Homan in Chicago yesterday because the assistant uh, attorney general was there with him. Well, why would the assistant AG be anywhere near this kind of stuff? And my only guess is that he's looking to see if there's violations that can be charged on Chicago sanctuary leaders. I don't know what's going to come of this, but they've threatened it. So, and not just city officials, but they're saying, if churches start to hide immigrants in their facilities and that sort of thing, they'll bust them. They'll bust the priests and the pastors for doing that. That's obstruction. It's a felony, actually a felony offense. And I think it would just take three, four, five, six of those things to kind of get the message across to all church leaders and all people who would hide immigrants in their homes or businesses or whatever from ICE that you can it's illegal to do that.
It's yeah, and again, we're just starting week 2 of this administration, and we're talking about all this already. I wish Tom Homan would come to Arizona. Tom Homan, if you're listening, put Arizona at the top of your list.
I'm sure he'll be there. He seems to be very attracted to blue sanctuary places right now.
Well, and the other thing about Arizona, and I was talking to somebody else about this. Arizona, in my opinion, based on conversation I've had, it's a narco state, right? I mean, who controls this state? I mean, Adrian Fontes, they say, was an attorney for the cartel. Um, if you want to believe Katie Hobbs was elected, and you know, talking with Taylor of RGV Truth last week in Texas, parts of the Rio Grande Valley, how corrupt that is. What other states are similar to Arizona? So, I'm not surprised that we're getting this pushback right now.
Well, there's a reason why the U.S. Marines are being deployed to blue jurisdictions like Arizona and California because, well, first of all, Texas being a red state, Greg Abbott has had Operation Lone Star. I mean, billions and billions of dollars the Texans have spent of their own money to, at least catch drug traffickers and, be there to deter other bad guys. They can't really stop the illegal immigration very well, but they do have a lot of barbed wire and concertina wire up. The point is Texas is doing something, anything, but New Mexico, Arizona, and California have nothing like that. Strictly border patrol, and there aren't enough of them to cover the vast spaces down there. So the deployment of military is absolutely key to blue jurisdictions like Arizona to get that border sewed up so they can catch more immigrants and drug traffickers and turn them over to Border Patrol, who this time won't be releasing them in, will be expelling them back. That's the big change. That's the big change. That's the page turner. Not letting them in, expelling them all, or detaining them all until they can.
When they expel them out, is it just like me pushing you, like physically? Not, I mean, but just turn
No,
around.
no, there's a process. They'll bring them into Border Patrol, brick and mortar stations, or even set up a field station, take their fingerprints and biometrics, get them identified, and then bring them to a bridge or a port of entry, and then turn them over to the Mexicans at the port of entry, and the Mexicans take them. That's why Greg Abbott was never able to do that because you'd have to have the Mexicans cooperating for that, and you'd also have the Biden's um, inspectors, the blue uniforms on those bridges, let them get past even them. So you had two layers to get through on the Texas bridges, but not not anymore. Now the Mexicans are taking them all back.
Have you talked to anybody in Border Patrol since Trump took office?
Yes, yes.
How are they doing in
I mean,
comparison?
morale is just sailing. It's like they're all on ecstasy. It's night and day. They love everything they're hearing and they can't wait to just finally do their jobs. It's very demoralizing. Let's imagine you trained as a Navy SEAL for war. You're a war fighter. And then the war comes along and your job is just to, guard the milk stand, in the rear echelon. Now these guys are all trained to interdict and hunt, capture, arrest. They've got guns, they've got horses, they've got ATVs, they got eyes in the sky. They have all this stuff that's designed to catch and then deport. They get to actually expel so that they feel like they're actually protecting America. It's one of the great things about being in a border patrol is because it's visceral. You protecting the country is visceral. It's real. You got a bad guy before he could get in and expelled him or detained. So it's those guys are on cloud nine, man.
Now, with the military presence, how concerned? This is what I was talking about with Matt Bracken a little bit over the weekend. Where do you sit in terms of they're there and you've got cartel, for example, in Phoenix, I'm assuming, because I don't know, all over the place here. Do you expect some type of cartel retaliation or something, some type of conflict?
Bring it, because there's a new sheriff in town, who probably would retaliate in force. So it's going to be bad for business. If you're the cartel and you try to mess around like that on our side, I'm going to guess, Trump, one of the great things about Trump is in his way of ruling is he follows something called the madman theory. It's in his book, The Art of the Deal, where he talks about make the other side think you're half crazy and you'll do anything, and that normal internal human restraint doesn't apply to this one guy because it keeps the bad guys off kilter. They don't know what this guy might actually do. He's crazy, right? And he's a mastermind at that. We just saw him do that with the Colombians. He just manhandled them. Uh, they weren't willing to ramp up a trade war with Donald Trump because they know that he would probably he's crazy enough to destroy the country economically.
Yeah, what did you think yesterday when you saw that? I mean, you don't get a day off in this news cycle right now.
None of that was surprising. None of it was surprising. We saw Trump behave this way during 1.0 when he told the Mexicans, if you don't, shore up your southern border with Guatemala, we're going to put trade tariffs on. Get your troops out there and shut it down. And they believed him. It was the madman theory. God, he just might do it. 25% tariffs, that would literally leave the Mexican country in ruin, just 25%. Um, so, he meant business and they did exactly what he wanted them to do with all of his policies in 1.0. And somehow this idiot running Colombia, his name is Petro, is a far left-wing communist guy, former guerrilla fighter out in the jungle for communism. Tells you where he stands. Somehow, like, missed all this and dared to turn back some military flights, deportation flights from the U.S. And bam, it was on 25%. Next week we'll do 50%. Well, Colombia, I think about 20% of their economy relies on exports to the US. So a 25% tariff on that would literally wipe out whole vast segments of their economy. They wouldn't be able to sell their goods. They'd be too priced out. Um, they'd lose market share to other competitors and whatever, all the bad things that happen. But 50%, So it wasn't very long. I mean, everybody knew that that wasn't going to last. I mean, it's absurd. But it was good that it happened because it let the whole rest of the world's nations who have to take back our deportees for the next 4 years know what's going to happen to them if they resist. There can be no disobedience here at all on this. None.
Yeah, and next thing you know, he's sending. What did he offer the plane? The presidential plane?
Well, he offered the presidential plane. I think Trump should demand the presidential plane, or it'll be 100% tariffs. Get that presidential plane. I mean, really, the the political optics of us using that presidential plane to haul migrants couldn't be more profound or poignant. He needs to get that presidential plane in service, man.
What? He is, I tell people, you love or hate Trump, you got to give the guy credit. I mean, he just doesn't quit. And you've seen it in the last week. I mean, the guy, he's unbelievable. I mean,
He's a classic strong, kind of a strong man leader, and the world respects that. The world respects force and leverage and power. They do, and they don't respect anything less. And so, we saw Joe Biden just pushed around like an unarmed child in a bad neighborhood, just brutalized constantly by world leaders on every single issue. This guy comes in, he's the polar opposite, Trump, and this is what you get. Colombia somehow missed the memo or didn't get the memo about crazy Trump. But at least he's our crazy Trump, um, dealing with people like that. That's how you deal with people like that.
and we will never see somebody like this in our political, at least I don't think in my lifetime ever again, like him.
Right. It's why I don't think the injustice porn as it pours out is going to have much of an effect, even if it does manage to erode public support for the deportations. Trump is a lame duck. He's going nowhere after this except into retirement and onto the golf courses. So he's not too worried about reelection or anything else. And let the injustice porn fly. He's going to keep doing it. He's just going to keep doing it and say, yeah, too bad on them.
Well, and they overplayed their hand on the mainstream media with all this injustice porn and everything else, and so people are tired of it. I mean, you see in their numbers, nobody even watches media, the mainstream media, any longer.
I think you're right. Plus, the American people voted for Trump on this issue, primarily on this issue. I think Trump even said it himself. He said it was the immigration more than the economy, even that won his election. And he always knew it. He always knew it because what happened was after it took a couple of years, but the pipeline filled up to the big cities in the north and blew up, burst all over the living room. Uh, the immigrants were all over the place. The Chicago Tribune could suppress the news all they wanted, but people saw it all around them in their schools. Their kids were coming home saying, God, my class is filled with people that don't speak English. What do I do, mommy? You know, so it was real. And that's what Trump sort of understood, that it didn't matter whether it got media coverage. People were sick of it. They hated it. Go look at any video of a Chicago City Council meeting. They're packed in there to the rafters, screaming and yelling bloody murder at these city council people for spending hundreds of millions of dollars on illegals instead of the black community. They've been asking for fractions of that for 50 years and not getting it.
Well, and what is it? Trump's first term, he wanted to declare the cartels. He wanted to do an executive order to declare the cartels a terrorist organization. He didn't do that because he was able to, and I'm posing this as a question. He was able to work out some type of deal with the Mexican government to avoid that, correct? Or do you remember?
I'm sorry, you
Yeah.
bugged out a little
No,
bit
I
there.
said so the first term because since he's been in office, he did an executive order declaring the cartel as a terrorist organization.
Right.
I believe that he wanted to do that in the first term, but I thought he worked out some type of deal with the Mexican government to avoid that.
I'm not sure why he didn't do it then. It's never really been reported about what happened, or at least not that I've seen. Um, but it looks like he's ordered the State Department to produce a recommendation in the next probably maybe 7 or 8 days in a week or so about whether to declare them foreign terrorist organizations. And of course, by doing that, it's perceived that it would give federal agencies greater authorities to punish the cartels financially, mainly financially. Means they can seize their assets. I mean, they can kind of already do that. Some of these things they can already do that. It's a little redundant, but you can arrest people for providing material support. So if you're doing business with the cartels, like if you're a bank and we catch you doing money laundering for them, oh man, your execs are going to prison for a long time. This is going to make banks pull out. And that can happen abroad too. Banks anywhere in the world, we can go after you. So I think it does bring to bear more tools, more arrows in the quiver, kind of a thing. I don't think it's clear yet if they have the human infrastructure, the people to do this, because the current infrastructure is mainly the FBI doing ISIS and Al Qaeda. They've got their hands full with that. So I'm not sure how they're going to resource this thing. When you've got 50, 60 different Islamic terrorist organizations that are already maybe not getting full treatment, terrorist treatment. Then you add the Sinaloa cartel, which has 60,000 employees. That's just one of the nine major ones. There's hundreds of thousands of employees, terrorists, I guess. I mean, so I really am eager to see what they come up with in terms of how they're actually going to exercise these new authorities.
God, the Sinaloa cartel has over 60,000 people employed by
Yes,
them.
that's one of the nine cartels. There's eight more, and there's lots of smaller ones in between.
Yeah, people don't understand when you're talking about a cartel, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
That's right. It's why it may be the reason why Trump 1.0 didn't do it, because how are we going to resource this thing? Those things are gigantic. It'll literally suck all the oxygen out of the Al Qaeda room and the ISIS room, and then the next thing you know is those guys are starting to blow stuff up here, and Congress is saying, "Where were you?" Well, we were working on the CNGJ cartel. All personnel. I don't know. I mean, they're going to have to figure something out, some scoping. I'll be watching that.
How did Mexico allow it to these groups to get so large?
Well, I guess if the first default answer to that is corruption. They're getting paid off. The top guys, the president, the department, their equivalent of the attorney general, and his whole family getting millions and millions of dollars, stuff like that. Presidents getting Vicente Fox and his whole family. And then, when you're getting paid off like that, you're telling all your people downstream, leave them alone, leave them alone, leave them alone. I'm gonna veto that operation. And next thing you know, those cartels are buying weaponry and tanks and rocket propelled grenades and 50 cal machine guns. And then it becomes too costly, as Calderon discovered in 2006, 7, 8, and 9. when he went to war against the cartels and lost, had to retreat and withdraw in ignominious defeat.
Yeah, and where do they get the training for this? The tactical training? What government is supplying all this?
Well, a lot of them are coming in from Mexican special forces. A lot of them are ex-military. They get recruited in for big dollars and they train. I mean, I've heard stories about, mercenaries from Israel and Lebanon and other places like that coming in to do training. Who knows? But they have plenty of military personnel in Latin America, Central America. They can bring any of them in and pay them whatever they want to do training.
Do you so if I thought the cartels were already declared through executive order terrorist organization. So if they haven't been yet, and Trump does decide to do it, you anticipate they'll just choke them out financially rather than go some type of kinetic conflict using military.
I don't see him doing military kinetic conflict. That crosses a lot of red lines even for Trump. If some of those cartels crossed over our border in force and like say attacked a town or something and slaughtered a bunch of Americans, it's going to be the Navy SEALs. But short of something like that, and I think the Mexican cartels are very acutely aware of what's in their self-business interests. They're not going to do anything like that. They've always avoided that sort of thing on our side. They'll do targeted killings and occasionally they'll find one of their rivals and kill them over here. And there's been some beheadings. But for the most part, the cartels do not come over here and try to slaughter Americans because if they did, it would be really bad for business, as they say,
What about it's one of the
especially with Trump in office.
well, and one of the things Auden and I were talking about last week, where he could envision these other countries, Mexico, Central America, certain countries in Central America, banding together if the United States were to do some type of military action. Could you see something like that occurring?
I hadn't thought of that. It's a novel idea. Way to go, Auden. I don't know. I mean, for one thing, if the United States did do something like that, the big risk, in my opinion, is that you immediately convert a frenemy, which is Mexico now. Everybody pretends to be friends, but we're really not that good of friends, into an overt, outright enemy, diplomatically. I mean, it would be an estrangement that would have a lot of consequences economically and diplomatically for a long time because, unilateral military activity on somebody else's soil is always a bridge too far, right? Changes everything. And you run the risk of having, regular Mexican citizens see this and become our enemy too, and start to lionize the cartels as like these heroic, iconic, um, forces standing against, the evil American invaders. And you grow them. And I think that's military action is there's a lot of negative consequences to anything like that. However, it would not be out of turn if the Mexican military took on the cartels again, like Calderon, with U.S. advisors, equipment, training, and intelligence. That would be okay because it would be Mexican led and authorized. It'd be the Mexican troops raiding in the front with like some American military guys in the back, maybe some snipers and support, that kind of thing, like we did with FARC in Colombia. That's really the model. FARC ultimately was defeated. The main force of it was defeated and declared, we give up in 2016 and turned in all their arms.
Would that be something that would be long and drawn out if the United States would provide resources to the Mexican military versus the cartel, or would it be
Yes,
it'd be drawn
it'll
out?
go, it'll go for years, years and years. But, that kind of thing strikes me as a wise investment because ultimately it should succeed in militarily destroying these organizations and allowing the Mexican government to reoccupy their northern provinces and take back their government and their territory and be in a better position to halt the fentanyl coming across and drug trafficking and human trafficking and that sort of thing as well and keep them tamped down.
How do you advise people that want to travel to Mexico right now to avoid it, or
Just depends. I mean, I think the resorts are fine. There's lots of security. The cartels know not to mess around over there. Um, the resorts are fine. There's something like I read somewhere 2 million American retirees that permanently live in Mexico. All these cities and towns. I mean, there's a lot of area of Mexico that's perfectly safe. So it just depends on where you go. Don't go to the places where I go. I would not recommend anybody go where I go, but like there's lots of places that are perfectly fine.
when's your next trip plan there?
I don't know. I was going to go last week, but something came up, personal came up, and I just couldn't. I'm thinking maybe pretty soon in the next week or so. I'll probably go down and just check it out, see what's going on. I'm eager to see the Marines down there, what they're doing, and I want to see Border Patrol actually turning, hauling people back over the bridge and turning them over to the Mexico. I'm not seeing that yet. I know it's happening, but I don't think American media is capturing any of it. I'd like to see what they're doing.
Would you cross over the border as well into Mexico and just kind of get a sense of what the border town is like right now?
Yeah, I don't spend any of my time on the US side.
Oh.
I just go straight to the Mexican side. That's where you see it.
What about these protests that I started seeing last night? I think it was either Auden or Taylor Auden was talking about it on X. Man, is X it's a time suck, but man, you get a lot of good information on there.
Uh, yeah, there'll be lots of that. That's all part of the injustice porn industry and the machine. They'll be, churning those out every chance they get. And at those, they'll be lodging crazy accusations of abuse and torture and, ICE did this terrible things and, all of it with one objective in mind, which is to just get it paused, get it stopped, make them stop until we can investigate for 3 years or whatever. Um, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, somebody was writing. I didn't see what she wrote, but Selena Gomez, I guess, is chiming in on this about the
No,
injustice. Savannah Hernandez was just talking about that, or
well, I'm very eager for other people to pick up my injustice porn coined term. I think it needs to be coined and just used all the time whenever it's just injustice porn again. Prove it. You know, we went out and looked and, that guy's lying. He never lived in that city. Whatever.
that could be some merch there, Todd. You get a coffee mug that says injustice porn.
Right, I know.
If you do that, just send me one. That's all. That's all I want for my fee. Another thing is you just put out an article this morning, and love to take a few minutes and talk to you. Talk about what that article is about.
Yeah, CIS.org, under my name, Todd Bensman, Center for Immigration Studies. That is the first of three pieces that I'm writing. I just submitted the second one a little while ago. It should run tomorrow about what I think is the most interesting of all the executive orders, and it's Trump's order on counterterrorism at the borders and vetting. Remember the term extreme vetting? Well, that was Trump 1.0. We're going to do extreme vetting on everybody coming into the country to look for terrorists, to filter out terrorists. And of course, Biden did away with that. And this executive order is very interesting. It's got a lot in it. And one of the things in it is that it appears as though he has ordered up operations against pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic protesters at the college campuses who have visas, student visas or whatever, and to revoke those visas, round them up, and ship them home. Uh, it's pretty clear from the language that that's what they're going to do in very short order. Now, it's going to, and Trump has on the campaign stump talked a lot about this. We're going to round those people up. You can't just come into this country on our visa, foreign national, and promote and advocate for a U.S. designated terrorist group. That would be Hamas, which is what's happening all over the country right now at college campuses. They're all out there with the green, Hamas is great, banners and all that from the river to the sea, and kill all the Jews and that sort of thing, destroy Israel. And he says he's going to go after them. And my piece just sort of describes the language that points to that that's what they're going to do. And then also just kind of predicts that there's probably going to be litigation about that because we've never done anything like that. It's a kind of a First Amendment challenge issue. Are people allowed to advocate foreign nationals who are here on our suffrage? We've given them permission to be here, which we can take away if they violate the terms. But does advocating, just merely supporting a designated terrorist group, qualify as an ineligibility for to hold the student visa? So I think there's probably going to be some litigation, but not before they try it. So that's something definitely to watch. It's going to be really interesting to see that unfold at the college campuses.
That was my first. I've heard this before, and my first thought was, okay, is that a First Amendment? Are we taking away free speech? Because things always expand, right? Where you might not like it, but that's what this country is built on, is free speech. So will it make
Right.
people hesitate to speak out?
Well, if the question, and I think it's a legal question, and probably the Supreme Court will end up answering it, is whether foreign nationals who are here by our generous suffrage, in other words, we've issued them a visa that can be revoked for all kinds of different reasons. Whether that's one of the reasons is the issue that would have to be qualified in court. But I think they're going to try it, and they may win it because they're not U.S. citizens. They're here on a visa. We're not putting them in jail. We're taking the visa away and deporting them. I mean, so it's a different category of person, and so we'll see.
It's uncharted territory with this,
Yes, it's very novel, very novel.
and not many people are talking about it.
Nobody's talking about this. I think my piece out today is the first one that I could find. I searched everywhere to see what's been written about it. Now nobody's written this up. The order's been out for a week.
Now, can you give a little sneak peek to? Because I'll put this conversation out before your piece comes out tomorrow. But can you give a little coffee and a mic exclusive on what the second part is?
Yeah, the second piece, one of the directives in that same executive order, there's a lot in there. It's a short order, but there's boy, that's packed. It is requiring what he calls robust national security vetting for all visa applicants abroad before they can be approved. So, and it doesn't matter, it's across government agencies. So, State Department, USCI, they all have to do this robust vetting, and they have to really be thoughtful about what they're going to do to get the vetting done. That order it expands. I mean, it probably covers millions of foreign nationals. So if they actually do it, it's going to really slow the roll of people being granted whatever student visas or work visas or business visas, especially if you're from certain parts of the world, meaning that have been identified as having terrorism threats in them. So um, the order requires that they fix the vetting processes to a baseline level and um, and restore it to what it was before Joe Biden got in and basically eliminated it, blew it off. And I just point out that, the Center for Immigration Studies and a big database that I built myself for the center, which is of 50 cases of national security vetting failure that I ascribe to 6 different agencies, 50 different ones, terrorism, Chinese spies, human rights violators, all kinds of bad guys, where we just screwed up and let them in, where we could have caught them before letting them in. And that I'm just saying this database is tailor made for helping the Trump administration get a big jump start on the fix. So I'm just talking a lot about what they're calling for and then suggesting my database, which is just sitting there ready, that I built it for this purpose so that somebody in government who's interested in fixing national security vetting so that there's fewer failures would use this as a roadmap for that. So in part, it's saying what the EO does and broadly, and then also just saying, hey, look, there's a roadmap sitting here waiting for you, and anybody can go on this thing. It's very interesting reading how we screwed everything up and let all these terrorists in, even after 9/11, years and years after 9/11. I mean, my last 2 entries in this thing were 2 terrorists, like in December. I mean, it's still happening.
How concerned are you?
Anyway,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
yeah.
Oh, how concerned are you, in regards to all the people that have come into this country? They've talked about Chinese, they've talked about ISIS, they've talked about Al Qaeda, and there's so many soft targets. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but, you drive around on a Saturday afternoon, you could always do damage. You can do damage all over the place. What are your thoughts on something occurring like a 9/11 or even smaller scale in the United States right now?
Well, I'm very concerned. I just came back from Chicago and with a 3-part series on the first terror attack by a border crossing immigrant in Chicago. Guy comes over the from Tijuana into San Diego and makes his way to Chicago and then conducts a full-fledged terror attack against the Jewish community, Orthodox community, a neighborhood in Chicago. Shoots a Jewish guy in the back, wounds him grievously, then turns the gun on the cops and engages in a 4-minute firefight. He gets wounded, taken into custody, charged with terrorism. It happened. It's already happened. And there are tens of thousands of people from Mauritania, Senegal, the Sahel countries over there, from the Middle East. They're all in already and unvetted. So, given that one terror attack has actually happened with blood spilt, wounded Jewish guy, wounded attacker, shell casings all over the neighborhood, I'm very concerned that it's going to happen again. I think the threat is extremely elevated. It's no longer hypothetical. It happened, and it happened in Chicago.
And I would anticipate something on a much larger scale versus a one-on-one conflict type of thing.
Me too. Me too. Because, those guys are all talking. They're on chat rooms. They're in encrypted chat rooms. And most of them, mean, listen, we've had probably in excess of 100,000 special interest aliens from Muslim majority countries enter the country and be released over the border. They're here. And all we did was run database checks on them at the border to see if they had any criminal records inside the United States. They've never been here before. So, of course, the answer is no, and we released them. They're all here.
Well, what do you say to people, Todd, that to me, in my view, I categorize them as blissfully unaware. Like they have no idea what's going on. They wouldn't want to listen to you and I talk like this for the last hour. But they come to you and they say, what should I do? Do I not go out at night? You know, I don't really go out at night anyway, and I avoid large crowds primarily for what you and I have just been speaking about. But what do you say to somebody who comes to you for suggestions or advice?
Well, first of all, nobody ever comes to me for that. But I don't know. I have kids. I just would, exercise routine caution. Don't go to bad neighborhoods where there's high crime. Stay away from, the big groups of window washers over on the street corner. Who knows? Stuff like that. I mean, um, there are people that have no choice but to live in apartment complex areas that are controlled by Tren de Aragua, MS-13. Um, it's unfortunate for them. I don't know what to tell them. They don't have many options. They're getting victimized all the time.
How do you feel about this as we coming into completing the first month of 25 and starting day 8 of the Trump administration, where things are going, where things are at, and where things are going?
Well, you mean in terms of immigration?
Yeah, immigration and what your work is, and just overall for the country right now, the state of the country and where it's at, and where do you think it's going?
Right. Well, I mean, I think for immigration, the main thing is that the the hemorrhaging is over. So they're not coming over the border anymore. The border, in my opinion, is pretty sutured up. The Trump administration is going to have to keep doing expulsions, 212F, remain in Mexico expulsions down there in order to ensure that it stays that way. Um, but I think that they'll do that for the next 4 years. So while once they've got the blood tied off, the bleeding is tied off, they can concentrate on the interior to make the country safer every single day with these roundups of criminal aliens first. And then I think that for the economic health of municipalities and federal government agencies, they have to remove illegal immigrants from the welfare rolls, from the hospital lines where they don't pay anything, um, to, start to bring down the spending levels for public welfare on all these millions of people. It's going to take a long time for that because there are millions of people. And even at the height when Obama was in office of deportations, he was only ever able to get 4 million out. So, maybe if the Trump administration could get 5 or 6 million out, that would be appreciably better in a lot of different ways for all of our institutions and for public safety and all. It's just for the better in every possible way.
Where can people find you, Todd?
Yeah, you can follow me on X, Bensman Todd. I have a newsletter that I like to promote. It's free. If you want, when I write something, I send it out and here I wrote something. And that's the best way to keep track of me is my newsletter, which you can find at toddbensman.com. It's right there on the front page.
Does your family, I mean, they've obviously watching your work for a long time, but I mean, what do they think of all this, of what you've done and what you continue to do?
I don't know. I think they think I'm weird, but You know, I mean, my wife, I've been married for 25 years, so you know, I was a journalist for a big stretch of that, so she's used to it. She knew what she was getting into. This is just me doing my thing, you know.
I
This is
mean,
mine.
the kid, like when your kids' friends come over, like when they first and they learn what you do for a living, they have to be blown away by that, right?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I don't tell them that much. I don't know. They don't know that much.
They think you're some boring writer or something, or
Yeah, yeah, just some kind of policy stuff they don't understand, you know.
Todd, as always, thanks for coming back on. Thanks for everything you do, and look forward to continuing to follow your work and more conversations ahead in 25.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Mic drop.